Thank you for joining us for this Directors Club exclusive, Dealing with Adversity with the great Tim Buwick. Um, Tim, before we get into everything, today I want to talk about your 30 plus years at Wilson. I remember you at Wilson when you were the U.S. Promotions Director and the things that you did for NCAA and the USTA. I mean, I followed your career for a long time, and then I feel like we lost connection. And Mark McMahon, actually, I believe, is the one that put me back in contact with you. And the minute that we talked on the phone, I was, instant. That was the quickest 30 minutes ever. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
It did fly by,
Oh
that's for
my,
sure.
it
Yeah.
was it was incredible, and you're an inspiration, and I know you've dealt with a lot of adversity. And there's so much I want to talk about today, but before we start, because you have such an incredible studio that I'm ashamed that my office doesn't look like, I want to talk about your book because, for me, I was actually an English major in college, so it's always been a dream to write a book, and it's never happened. And I have so much respect for the people that can do it. Um, one for being able to sit down and actually do it, but two, to be able to reflect on the many, different times of your life to be able to bring something meaning to for others. So how'd you even start Blaze to Ablaze, and where did it come about?
Well, it all started with a bumper sticker, actually. After I left Wilson in March of 2018, I'm driving around the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I see this car and it has a bumper sticker that simply reads, whatever. I thought about that. I'm following this car and I'm saying, what would possess a person to put whatever on the bumper of their car? And so I'm following this vehicle probably for far too long, and I'm sitting at a stoplight contemplating this. So what does that mean? Why would that person do that? And the more I thought about it, the more fired up I got because I'm thinking, usually when you hear the term whatever, it's who cares? Blasé, it's like apathy, like whatever, you get all worked up about whatever. And I was thinking, no, it should be whatever it takes. And and so I'm following this car and I'm thinking, this is our one and only life. And are we going to go through life, whatever? It doesn't matter. Yes. No, it's exactly the opposite of that. Everything matters. Everything matters. And so I got fired up about it and I started to think about the general apathy that a lot of people have about life. And I'm thinking, how in the world, in this big, bold, beautiful world that's also broken, how could we be anything but apathetic? I'm thinking apathetic should be the last thing that we should feel. We could feel a lot of things. There's a lot of rage and outrage going on in the world, but apathy, no. And I'm going, what would make somebody apathetic about life? And it turned into Blasé to Ablaze. And the subtitle is How to Turn Your Blase into Ahhs to Ignite Passion and Purpose. And the genesis of this was that bumper sticker, but it was also a deeply personal journey because when I left Wilson, I was, as you stated, I was with Wilson almost 30 years. I started at the age of 4. It's one of the great stories in all of sporting goods history. But I was there. I mean, I was known as the Wilson guy. Well, then after I left, well, what am I known as now? So it really was, I took Socrates' dictum seriously where he stated, know thyself. And I thought, do I really know thyself? Like, who am I at my core? And so this book is really an outflow of that deep introspective journey that I took, which became the M5 method of decision making and self discovery. And so that was the journey that I was on in writing this book, and that's how it started.
What draws me to you is you're such, I think this is a lot of why we get along so well, but you're such a deeply thoughtful, reflective person. The fact of I think in my life, how many times do I see something and I start spacing out and you kind of have this out of body experience where you're starting to think about things. And almost when you look at a bumper sticker like that, I would also think the opposite for me. And obviously everything can mean something for different, everything different for different people. But, I feel like in my life, my mind's kind of like a storm. And I almost have to be the opposite where don't take everything so serious. You have to learn to let some things go. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with no hair and, crazy. But what I love about you is that you're able to take that time to say, what does this mean to me and how does it change my life? Do you think that, when you look at the world today, but even, in our rackets industry where we're going through so many different changes from tennis to rackets, you have search consultants, you have all these people trying to push their own agenda. How do people take a second to step back and be reflective and say, maybe I need to get out of my own way. Maybe there's more I need to learn, or maybe see things through somebody else's eyes. How do people become, like you're saying?
Well, I think many good points in there. And in fairness to the person who had that bumper sticker, it could have been, listen, let's not get all worked up about everything here. Whatever, relax. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. I should be despondent. This is just brutal. And I had to, well, I didn't have to watch the game last night, but I did, and more pain. And I can get so worked up about it. So there is a balance. And to me, in answering your question, it all starts with me. If it is to be, it is up to me. So it starts with me of once I know myself and how I'm wired and my gifts and abilities and talents, then I can know how to go forth from there about the things I really should get worked up about and things that I should just go off my back like a duck. And so that's the key, is because when our why gets bigger, our how gets easier. And it starts with why. And so my journey was really to figure out exactly how I'm wired. And that's how I came up with the Ablaze equation, which was taking my passion of what I have and multiplying that by my purpose, why I do what I do, plus my prowess, how I do, and the gifts and abilities that I have, plus problem, and attach that to the world. And if I get that equation right, purpose and prowess and passion and attaching it to a problem, a need in the world, if I get that equation right, then I will have an ablazing life. But so often we go and we shoot from the hip. And so, okay, what do I go to next? And we jump into something. Or my parents thought I would be a great lawyer, so I decided to go to law school. And then you figure out, wait a second, that's not me. Well, maybe I need to be a doctor. And I go, no, I get all crazy about needles. No, that's not what I should be doing. And so we've got to figure out who we are first, and then the how comes after that.
So let's talk about finding out who you are, because I that's an incredible point. I mean, I remember, God, being out of college and being lost and trying to ignore all the years I had of tennis because you failed at something, you can't recognize the opportunity in the same thing that you failed at. How do you, we always like to compare ourselves to others. It's like one rackets director makes more, one teaching pro makes more. We should always make what somebody else makes. We always want what somebody else has. I feel like most people are inheritably jealous in many ways. How do you get outside of that and find direction and say, I'm going to focus on myself. If I want to get to where this person's is, I want to learn from them, not feel like I'm entitled to something, but be able to learn from them and add to my skills to get that way. How do you find that direction?
Right. It's a great question. And it was the question that I asked myself. And so in determining who I am first, is that I had to look and say, okay, so when I am at my best, when I'm my best self, what am I doing? Who am I? What are the activities that I'm engaged in? And where do I excel? And so I really made quite a few lists through this process. One was my sparks list and my wet blanket list. So I made a list of all the things that give me a spark, things that get me jacked up, pumped, excited, optimistic. And then I made a list of the wet blankets, which often are the opposite of those things. So as an example, this might come as a shock to you, but I'm a people person. I'm relationship. I love people. I love building relationships. I love building community. In a cubicle all day, dealing with spreadsheets will suck the life out of me. It's just not how I'm wired. And so I figure out, what is my prowess? What are things that I naturally gravitate towards, that I excel at? And then I make that list, and then I go through and so as I go through this process, I'm better able to understand and then make a list of my wins. And for me, winning is not beating somebody else. Winning is any area in which I excelled when I was at my best. And so I made a long list of my wins of areas where people would say, "Hey, you were really good at that," or you really touched somebody's heart through that process. And so as I continued through this process, I started to dial down. And then as you make these lists and determine what lights your fire and what your sparks are and what feeds your flame, so to speak, to stick with my allegory here, is that then I'm able to craft, and this is really critical that I think everyone listening to us right now should do, is to craft a personal purpose and mission statement for themselves. We often do it for our businesses. We do it for our club. We do it for our corporation, whatever endeavor we may be working in. But rarely do we do it for ourselves. What is your personal purpose and mission in life? And it takes time to dial down this statement. And as through the book, I go through a process of how to do this, and I've got templates in there. But it serves as a guardrail in life. So I've been fortunate that I've been presented with some opportunities that have really been exciting, where I look and I go, wow, I could be a CEO. I could be a president here. I could be a director here, whatever it might be. And I look at the opportunity, and I would be lying to you if I said I wasn't enamored by the title, or they start talking compensation and my eyes light up, and so does my bank account, and go, ooh, that could be nice. And then I take a step back and I look and I go, as I break down the mechanics of this job and what I would be doing on a daily basis, Tim, does that fulfill your purpose and your mission in life? Are you inherently good with that? And oftentimes the answer comes back no, to my disappointment, because I would love to have the status that may come with that position, and go, that's not how I'm wired. And so in the my personal purpose and mission is to leave footprints on another person's heart by creating stick to your ribs type moments filled with light, laughter, and love. That's my mission in life. So what are those things and those positions and organizations where I can do that, preferably on a daily basis? And so now I can learn what to say yes to, and also what I can say no to as well.
I love that all of this has happened for you based on the 30 plus years that you had at Wilson, and the time that you've had to reflect to really understand what you're good at, to know that what you can help others with. It made me, I just got up and I have this framed on my wall. And when I got out of college and I was completely lost and had no idea what I was going to do with my life, I sat down and I wrote down goals on a piece of paper. And since I had them, put on here and framed, and it was little things from like money, freedom, power, pressure, respectable, difficult, benefits. So not all positive things, but also
Right.
travel, speaking, writing, developing, executive, professional notoriety, things that have grown into not just being a director, but what we have now with the Directors Club and speaking around the country. And when you talk, it makes me think back to saying the power of reflecting and putting down and on writing what you want. And it wasn't just, I want to be a known director. It was, well, what do I want that comes along with it? I want that pressure that comes along with it. I want the respect. I want to be able to develop. I want, I don't want an hourly thing. Like, it's being real with yourself.
Right.
And when you're real with yourself, when you keep moving forward on that mission, one day when you look back, it'll be amazing of how many boxes that you've checked. And it's so amazing what you're able to do based on the boxes that you checked. Do you think that enough people actually do that, or how can we get more people to actually sit down and be, because I've heard this in the past, like the hardest thing to do in the world is to look in the mirror and just be raw and honest with yourself. Just look in the mirror and be honest with who you are.
Absolutely.
How does somebody be vulnerable enough with themselves to do that, let alone be able to do it with others?
Going through this process is not easy. It really isn't. I mean, if we do it authentically and take a deep dive it can get scary and go, I've discovered I suck at a lot of stuff. Like, I'm really bad at not a small number of things, but I do know what I'm really good at. And I need to lean into those things. And I was talking just a short time ago, just an hour or two ago, with the University of Illinois. And I was talking to a gal there, and it was on a video call. And I was telling her is that about this process that I went through. And part of the reason I was so fired up about that whatever bumper sticker. And this is an area when you
Mm.
ask the question, do enough people do this? I think it's a resounding no. I think so often we have scores of people that sleepwalk through life and just continue to do what they do. They're exchanging hours for dollars. They don't think about passion or purpose. They're like, I got to pay the bills and go through it. I cannot wait for Friday because then I'm going to get trashed on Friday night and Saturday. And then I'll sober up on Sunday and then I'll go back at it Monday. And I'm going, no, 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 no. And I was telling this gal at University of Illinois, I said, we have an opportunity and it does not matter what our position, what our status, what our title, what we're doing. Every one of us, every single day has an opportunity to profoundly affect another person's life. That is an opportunity we all have. And everything matters. Everything matters. And that's where my passion comes from. But it first starts with the core of finding out how we're wired. And each one of us is uniquely wired to do only what you can do, Jarrett. Only what you can do. And that's it. And so it to me it's a fascinating process and it just keeps my fire burning. And one thing I have to say for full transparency, this book was written not as just, hey, don't worry, be happy, get pumped up, rose-colored glasses, things are great. It's written out of deep emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and physical pain. And it started as a job transition, um, what is your career fulfillment type book. And then a series of things happened in my personal life that were as difficult as anything that I have ever experienced. And I would not want anyone else to go through. And so it comes from a standpoint of how can we still have passion and purpose even when the heavy rains of life keep pouring down? Is that possible? And it is if we know why we're here, what we're doing, our purpose in life, and we're attaching it to a solve in the world, a problem in the world, a way that we can give back and add value to other people. We can do that despite our circumstances, and oftentimes because of our circumstances, because we learn about ourselves through it.
So Tim, you touched on something that really, really tugs on my heartstrings, which is life's difficulties, right? And I just now I really want, if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear you expand on some of those life difficulties that you got through. Clearly, you got through, because I've had some of my own, and they're life changing. But one thing with those experiences is it really gives the opportunity to have perspective, right? And once you go through those, perspective usually is a little bit different on the back side of it than it was on the front side of it. And this all started with a one word, whatever,
Whatever.
right?
Right.
Whatever. And you were so perfect. You were like, you can be whatever, who cares? Or else it can be whatever it takes. And I'm sitting
Mm-hmm.
back listening to it, and I'm thinking, well, if I saw that, I would be like, whatever, it's okay.
Right.
It's like it's there's all these different perspectives. It's like, is it a problem or is it a challenge? Is it criticism or is it feedback?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about how you look at it and how you decide, hey, this is how I'm going to absorb this. This is how I'm gonna digest this, and this is what I'm gonna do with it. And so people like yourselves, I think, just have an innate ability to say, okay, how can we turn this and make this into a situation, right? So you made a great statement. You were like, listen, you can every day, multiple times a day, you can have an effect on another person's life. And I agree with that 100%. I'd love to hear
Right.
you expand on, like, what are your options? in affecting a person's life on a daily basis when you come across them, and how do you maintain the right decision and the right choice with how you affect that person?
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And
Yeah.
yeah, a story from 15, maybe 20 years ago of just how simple this can be to have a profound effect on another person's life. I'm flying from Kansas City to Chicago. I'm in Midway Airport in Chicago, getting ready to fly back to Kansas City. And the lady at the Southwest Airlines counter is having a day. Oh, I mean, she is having a day. You can see she is so fired up. The guy in front of me is giving her the business and he's complaining about everything and all this kind of stuff. And then I get to the counter and she goes, "Okay, what can I do for you? What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I just need to check a bag and go through." And she grabs the bag and slams things on. And I said, "It's been one of those days, hasn't it?" She says, "Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea how." And I said, "Well," I look behind me, there's no line. I'm early for my flight. And I said, "I've got time. Give me an idea." "Oh, I'll tell you." And she went on, she uncorked. And, this guy cannot believe I have had like so many blankety blank customers today, and I can't believe how rude they are. And they go through the whole deal. And she's just blowing off steam. And this was not long, 4 or 5 minutes. And she says, "Tim, right?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "Thank you. I feel so much better. Just thank you for asking and for caring." And I said, "Absolutely." I said, I said, "I know I've had days like this. We all have, and it's no fun." I said, "But you got this. You got this." And I walked away and I'm headed to the gate and I looked over my shoulder and there she was standing there smiling.
Hmm.
I think, now what did that cost me? 5 minutes, and we can, as we deal with members and you're in a lesson and you've got your peers and people who are working for you. I mean, we all have a web of relationships. And I do passionately believe that we underestimate the power each one of us has. It's not a personality thing. It's not a position thing. It doesn't matter how you're wired. We each have an opportunity to profoundly affect another person's life. I'll tell you one other story of just how everything matters very quickly. Is I'm at a Wilson sales meeting and the president of Wilson comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Tim, I need to talk to you." Oftentimes not a good sign. And he says, "Hey, he says, listen, we've got an issue here. We're being threatened with a major lawsuit, like big time dollars. So if this guy calls you, make sure you make nice and call him back ASAP because he is mad and he's all lawyered up." And he says, "Just make sure if he calls you, call him back because he really likes you. You're one of his favorite people." And I asked her, "Well, who is this?" He tells me the name. And I go, "You have got to be kidding me. I have spoken to this person one time for less than 15 minutes. But the first 5 minutes of our phone call was about the outgoing message that I leave on my voicemail." And he says, "Oh, Tim, that's the best voicemail I've ever heard. That is incredible. I need to hire you to get everybody to you record all their mess." And he went on and on and on about it. That was the extent of our entire relationship. Literally, that was it. And for the president of Wilson to come up and say, "This guy likes you, so make sure you call him back." All he knows me is my outgoing message. And that really struck me about everything of how we conduct seemingly meaningless things can mean so much to another person. And again, that's why everything matters.
But there's no doubt. I mean, and think about it. You go back to that conversation that you had with that person that was working at the airport. What were the two things? What were the two words that struck out to you the most that they said to you?
Well, thank you.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the reverse effect of it, right? There's the pleasure of you being able to look at this person and be like, "Wow, I just changed this person's day." And then you walk away, and how does that make you feel?
It just makes me feel fantastic. And
Right.
the interesting thing is, and it doesn't it doesn't matter what your spiritual journey is, but the ancient scripture says, give and you shall receive. And whether you believe in that or not, it's true. It's true. That's the way the world works, is that we add value to other people and we get it in multiples in return. It's not why we do it. We don't do it as kind of a slick type thing of transactional. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And I feel blessed that I think there's an army of people that if I get myself in trouble, they would be there to help me out.
Mhm.
Now, that's not because I'm a great guy, but they know that I would do the same for them, that I care about them and their life. And as we go forth and conduct ourselves in that manner, good things happen because that's just the way the world works. People tend to be a mirror to ourselves. So
Mhm.
I know people in my life that all they do is whine, bitch, and moan, and they're the most selfish people in the world. And then they're upset at the world because you know what? Everybody in the world whine, bitches, and moans and really selfish. Hmm. Could it possibly be a reflection on you?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, I call it the positive bounce back effect. You know, if I'm positive with someone, usually it's going to be a positive reciprocation. So both people walk away from that interaction feeling better, right? You know,
Right.
and that's the key. You know, I talk to just love talking to people in the private club industry or the hospitality industry, and it's like you have two choices every time you interact with a person. It can be positive or negative. And it's I can't remember what the actual figures are, but it takes more muscles in your face to frown than it does to smile, you know?
Yeah, it
And
does.
so why put an extra effort in to be negative when it's so easy to be positive? You know, it's such a simple thing.
On
Uh,
the hospitality industry can be really difficult. I have a belief that there's only really 12 bad people in the world. It's just they move around a lot. They're at every club, they're in every business. You've got that small core that is always whining, bitching, moaning about something. And you say you can't please everybody all the time. And it's how we approach
yeah.
our life that makes a difference.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I mean, and you start talking about who you are, right? And you know, and I would love to get your perspective on, you know, is who you are, do you feel it's defined by who you want to be or how you want to be perceived?
Well, a quote came to mind. It says, reputation is what others people think about you. Character is who you are when nobody's looking. And I look, I say, if I'm consumed about how I want to be perceived, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm living my authentic self. And, there's a saying, don't worry too much about what other people think about you because guess what? Other people really aren't thinking about you. Interesting journey. There's several ways that I could answer that. First of all, when you're true to yourself, I think that's a thing of looking and just saying, I thought I was always this. I have perceived myself as a leader of men and a CEO. And I could do and go, you know what? Maybe I am the best possible teammate for somebody, but maybe I'm not wired for that top leadership position. That's totally okay. I love the definition of success that says it's not who I am in comparison to someone else. It's who I am compared to who I could be if I gave it 100%. And I think that's the key and is the authenticity of knowing what are the things that I am truly gifted in, what are the things that when I am my best self, I'm doing that. Where do I put my time, talent, and treasure given how I'm wired? And maybe it's not the expectation of my parents, my peers. Tim, you should be doing this. I can't believe you're not doing this. Why are you sitting alone at home writing another book? Well, you could be doing this. You could be, well, I could, but maybe that's not what I'm supposed to do.
I mean, my mind's being blown right now because I'm like, you guys are both making me go into deep thought because now I'm thinking like, what Chris said, who do you want to be? How do you perceive yourself? And I mean, Chris, how do you perceive yourself? Because I think I'm sitting here listening to you talk, Tim, and I'm thinking about my own life and the things that I'm involved in and the Directors Club. And we founded this thing because it's under the belief that we're better together. And if we can celebrate each other and compete and push each other, and be united, there's nothing that's greater in this world. But then when I bring it back to myself and I think to myself, well, how do I perceive myself, or how would others perceive me? I'm coming up empty with how I perceive myself. I'm the type of person that's so driven to of a goal of what I want to do that I don't often stop and think, how am I perceived? Because that always seems to be second to the mission of what I want. And I feel like almost when you care about others, and I deeply care about people in the industry and my staff and my club, there's not really room to look back and care about how others see you. Because if you do, you almost, in my mind, if you care so much about how people think of you, you're afraid to act. And whenever you make a decision and you're pushing towards a goal, there's going to be people that don't like you, and there's going to be people that love you. We see that in politics, we see that in anything. And I guess I've always come from the idea that, well, I guess I don't know, but it makes me think, how would I perceive myself? And Chris, I wonder if you've ever thought about it, because I certainly have not.
I know I've just started thinking about it while you started talking about it, and it's you can go into so many different tangents and so many different levels of it and so many different angles and perspectives, but the bottom line for me is I just want to separate. I don't want to compartmentalize it and have it as how I'm viewed as and perceived professionally, personally, with my friends, with my family, with my loved ones, whatever it is. I want to have a big, how is this guy perceived as a human being? And I think that that's what gets back to it for me. And the thought process is that my hope is that the perception of me is that I'm just a good person, and one who has the ability and acts upon that ability to make those around him feel better and be a better version or be the best version of themselves. I think that that's my hope of my perception.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do either of you have a personal purpose and mission statement written?
Not written.
Yeah.
Not written.
It would be a worthy process, because
Yeah.
then that would answer your question, Jarrett, of who are you? And once we know who we are, what other people think about us and their perceptions fades into black. Not that I don't care at all, but if I know I'm true to myself, and it's a worthy goal, I'm not to do things for evil, but it becomes less important. So here's an interesting thing is, I think, and maybe others can correct me, but through my time in the racket sports industry, which has been virtually my whole career, I have probably had a reputation as someone who isn't shy about offering opinions, doesn't really care all that much about how other people think. And I would constantly tweak the people in front of us, and above us in a peer group, whether it's the president or the CEO. I'd give them a hard time, and I'd make comments and send out emails, and to the point where some would say, well, how do you get away saying things like that? And I do it somewhat in a tongue-in-cheek manner. And so I had a reputation, I think, of, Buwick really doesn't really give a rip about what people think about them. Here's what I learned. When I left Wilson and got in and formed the Tim Buwick Company, and I've got to start doing social media and writing books and giving keynote speeches. And I went a long time being pretty much invisible from social media because I'm not a big fan of it, but it's necessary. And I realized, so Tim, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you, doing more podcasts than that? And to be authentic and true, I care a lot more what people think about me than I even thought. What if I write a book and not a single person buys it? What if I put myself out there to get hired as a keynote speaker and don't ever get hired? What if I make a podcast and nobody listens? And I will confess, I care deeply about how people perceived me. Then, as I continued to go through this process, I realized that doesn't matter, because I know what I should be doing, because I've spent the heavy lifting and the long hours to discover who I am and why I'm here. and it ties back to my personal purpose and mission statement. And so if I do those things, what other people think about me matters less. Yes, when I give a keynote address, do I want people to come up and say, Tim, thank you. That really meant a lot to me. Or yes, of course. I've got an ego and I want to make sure that I'm giving value. But does that make sense?
Well, there's a lot of things going on in my head right now with you talking, to be honest. A lot of it's making sense, but a lot of it's also like triggering things, which is a great thing because, going back to everything that you just described, this it makes me I feel a lot of similarities. And it makes me wonder, like when I said, when I think, who am I? And Chris had trouble answering, and in general, I wonder, does it even matter when you're in a real, if you're a real leader, if you're really driving change, does it really matter to consider who we are? Because in the end, right, we're so busy focusing on the fact of what drives us. And I feel like if we know what drives us, it doesn't really matter if we know who we are because we're staying true to ourselves, we're genuine, we're making change. And then when we get to what you talked about is, well, what do people think about us? Well, in the end, like you said, it doesn't matter, but that's also going to tell people, I've had many people write since we started the Directors Club or even in that magazine I was just in, what they think about me. And whenever I read these things of how people perceive me, I sit back and I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. Is that how I am? And it makes me think I've never really given much thought to it because in my world, and I'm starting to think in your world too, it doesn't really matter who you are because what matters is what drives you. And ultimately, what drives you, is that not what defines you in the end? And you kind
Well,
of land on who you are one day when you're older. I haven't landed on that yet.
so what drives you?
This is so deep, Tim. My mind's blowing. I need a drink. What drives me is something so general. It's to be the best and what I determine that is. And whether it was when I first became a director, I wanted to be the biggest name. And then when I got the second club, I wanted to be the director that was sought after, that didn't have to apply for the job. And then once I got this national platform, it was I want to make sure I can make real change and help people reach the same levels of success for themselves and their families. And so for each level, each time you level up, you have a new mission, you have a new drive. And to me, that drive never stops. So I don't really have time to think about, who I am.
But see, we could reverse engineer this and go back to, okay, so why are you driven to do this? Well, you want to add it, and then you keep going back and you get back to your why. You've already determined it. You just haven't articulated it. And so I would say you wouldn't be doing what you're doing if it didn't come from who you are and your passion. You just haven't written out a statement and articulated it, which is fine. That's because you use the phrase, as long as I stay true to myself. You just said that. And so who is that? And then you dial that back and you say, well, okay, so how do you stay true to yourself? Isn't that knowing yourself?
I don't know.
So so
Good.
when
No, I need some time to think.
so it's interesting earlier on in this conversation, Jarrett mentioned about, you want to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and have certain thoughts, right? But I get thinking, and everyone thinks about looking at themselves in the mirror and being happy with their hairstyle, the way that they smile, the way they look. Am I in shape? Do I need to lose a few pounds or whatever? But I got to a point in my life where looking into the mirror, but really being happy with the things that I can't see in the mirror are more important. And I'm saying this, and it looks like you're agreeing with me there, Tim. I'd love to hear you talk about kind of like were there like epiphanies or were there light bulb moments where what's on the inside became way more important than what's on the outside, and what was it that led to those thoughts and epiphanies and light bulb moments?
There's so many ways that I could answer that, but I'll talk about the last few years. And you said about difficult times. What I have learned, especially over the last couple of years, which have been by far the most difficult of my life, no comparison, And I'll share a little bit as to why. What I've learned is that not only is trauma and tragedy and suffering and difficulties and obstacles unavoidable in life, but they are absolutely essential to our growth. And within the last 2 years, going through the darkest times of my entire life, and I woke up one morning and I go, this is going to be the biggest battle of my life. I have to make a decision of being resentful, revengeful, angry, hateful, all the negative emotions because of a circumstance in my life, or will I determine to love through these obstacles? And will I determine to rise above and not let it change who I essentially am? See, when we go through very difficult times, think of the human heart, okay? And it affects us. We are changed by terrible tragedy and trauma. And just to preface what I'm about to say, and I'll be just completely transparent, within the last 2 hours, I hung up the phone with a psychiatrist at a hospital in Pittsburgh, and my daughter's back in the mental hospital, about her 8th trip. I have multiple children dealing with severe mental illness. It is sheer hell. I won't sugarcoat it. I won't varnish it. I could tell you stories where you would maybe say, Tim, you're making this up. There's no way. And it has been a true horror. And I knew when I got a phone call last night, I was announcing basketball, and I saw a phone number that I didn't recognize from Pittsburgh. And I go, oh God, here we go. And that was just literally 90 minutes ago. Really difficult stuff, pin in the stomach type things. And so the decision I've got to make going through these terrible trials of things that a parent would never want to go through, I have a decision to make. I could have my heart, and when we're under the intense heat of suffering, we can have our hearts like clay and become hardened, or they can be like butter and be softened by it. And I hope that through these terrible circumstances that are ongoing, and most likely they will continue to be ongoing for a long period of time because we're well over a decade into this, is that I have become a better person because of it, more empathetic, more caring. When I run into people who are going through, who have said, I've lost children in a car accident, I know emotionally what it feels like to lose my kids. I know what it feels like because it's happened. And so I just got an email Sunday night, a friend of mine in college who's just diagnosed with ALS, one of the most despicable diseases out there, just horrific. And so to take a deep, serious moment here, the book was written out of much pain. I had open heart surgery 3 years ago yesterday, and that doesn't even make the top 5 list of difficult things I've been through over the last few years, remarkably. And so I share that with you because I want you to know that this isn't like just optimistic feel-goodism, is that we all go through horrific things. It's just life. So how do we overcome that to continue to not only, well, let me interrupt myself here because I'm working on my second book, and it's this subject. And what I did is I kind of broke it down. When we go through difficult circumstances, they fall into essentially 3 camps. There's the subsiders, the survivors, and the thrivers. When we're met with genuine tragedy and trauma, which my family has experienced over the last few years, horrific stuff. We can let it ruin us and be a subsider. We sink. We can clench our teeth and hang on for dear life and be a survivor, but oftentimes living in resentment, and we've changed and it's sucked the joy out of our life. And what about those people that rise above and are the thrivers in spite of what they've been through? And it's a study. This book is going to be a study of those people. How did they do it? How did they survive when half their family was killed in a plane crash? How do you do that? How do you continue to move on? And so I wanted to share that with you because here at Directors Club of America, do we realize what a privilege we have to work in the toy department of life every day? I've been in so many hospitals, mental hospitals, intensive care units for a variety of different reasons. For me personally, as well as family members and friends. Those are the true saints of the world, the nurses and the doctors that are working in ICU. This lady, the psychiatric doctor, just called me from Pittsburgh. I thanked her and I said, gosh, the team of people that have been around my daughter helping her has been remarkable. We get to work in the toy department of life. I mean, I used to get worked up when tennis balls were back ordered. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I'm going, Tim, it's tennis balls. Somehow we'll make it through. I don't know if that answered my question. Frankly, I can't even remember what your question was, but I wanted to share that with you.
Neither can I, Tim, because that story is amazing. And the fact that you're here with us this soon after receiving that phone call just shows your true character and who you are and how you are. And, it's so interesting listening to, like those, the survivors, the thrivers and the subsiders, it's like, how do you thrive? And you asked that question, but I hear it and I listen to you and your family, and my gosh, it just tugs on my heartstrings in such a major way. And as the father of a beautiful daughter, and all you want is the best in life, right? But you thrive as an individual, but you also thrive with the ability to lean upon others. And my hope is that you have the ability to thrive and lean upon others within your family and within your loved ones.
It's amazing how many people we've met, and they know what you're going through, and they go, oh gosh, can I share my story with you? I'm not alone. I'm not going to pretend that I have been unfairly treated. And there's times where I go, well, why me? Why is all this happening to me? All these things and many stuff that I'm leaving out that has just been, you've got to be kidding me. And I could look and I could easily sit back and say, why me? Other people aren't going through this stuff. Why does this stuff keep happening to me? And I go, no. People are going through much worse as well. And as the scripture says, the rain falls equally on the wheat and the chaff, to paraphrase. It all happens. I'm not getting picked on. I'm sure you could tell a story, and Jarrett, you can tell a story, and many people who are watching this going, oh my gosh, my Aunt Betty or what, I mean, life is hard. And I have been someone who's had a reputation for most of my life as everything just seems to work out for me. My oldest sister calls me the golden child. Oh, it always works out for you, and everything you touch is, it turns to gold. I go, I've had people say, Tim, have you ever had a bad day? Oh my gosh. Can I tell you a story? The problem is I don't have to make everybody else's day bad because I have a bad day. And I look and I take all these experiences as horrific, and I will just, again, be transparent. I have never sobbed and cried my eyes out more than I have the last couple of years. It has just been so incredibly difficult in just such a wide variety of ways. And even as it's going on, Tim, this is good for you. Not that you want this to happen, but I can grow from this. I can learn from this. I can be a better person through this. I can be more sensitive to others. And I, even as it's going on, I wanted to be able to use this experience for good, to help other people that are going through it that nobody knows about. And so that's just, again, it's essential to our growth that we face tough times. And
Yeah.
so if we look at it in that way and say, you know what? God, I just choked another three setter. How could I be up 5-0 serving 40-15 and choke and lose in a tiebreak? And I used to think that'd be the worst thing in the world. I have discovered it's not.
You know what I think about that now, Tim?
What's that?
Whatever.
Hey, I've got a bumper sticker for you.
Yeah, you got a good one, right? But Tim, it's amazing, isn't it? You're talking, and you said that you spend time in a variety of hospitals and areas of where people are in suffering, but there's also the loved ones they're suffering with them, right? And it's so amazing to see the body language of another person when you're talking to them about something that's going on with you and your family, and you can almost see like the whole relief in their body with the thought process of like, I'm not the only one going through this, or it's almost like a satisfying to hear, or it's almost like almost relaxing to hear that, okay, I'm not the only one going through this adversity.
I There have been times where I've felt like I was the only person in the world. And I and then to get that support of going, wait a second, I'm not the only one that this has happened. And very quick story is a totally separate incident, if you call it that, a situation, a circumstance, is my youngest daughter was born without a piece of her spine. And it's a long story, but at 21 months, we had to put her, she had a 7.5 hour surgery, full body cast from the nipple line down past her toes. And we had to wheel her around in a mechanical cart for 4.5 months. Then we had to do the surgery again. And it was, otherwise she would be paralyzed. And the emotional grief of turning your 21-month-old over to the doctor, knowing that they're going to cut on her for most of the day. The reason why I tell the story is at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. God bless them. There's the very first Ronald McDonald House within a hospital. And that's where we stayed for a couple of nights. And it was like a war room. And the reason I tell you the story is because we met with other families that were also, what's your story? Oh my gosh. I saw some of the most horrific things and actually went around and visited some of the patients on the floor, seared into my brain. And so then I go to a Wilson sales meeting and the general manager is ranting and going, nothing's more important than hitting our first quarter numbers. Nothing's more important. I'm going, yeah, I mean, my child might be paralyzed.
Mm.
That's slightly more important.
Yeah.
And it gives you perspective. And I actually think I did my job better going through that trauma because it took the edge off. I gave too much importance to hitting my sales numbers or distribution goals or whatever it was that I was working on professionally. And I could do it because I could approach it with, I'm going to give you my best sales pitch. I think we should do business together. We should partner together. If you say no, then I think you're making a mistake. But guess what? I've got a bumper sticker that says whatever. I'll be okay. And I felt like I was able to relax more because of those things.
It gets back to that word we used earlier, right? Perspective and what truly matters. And sometimes those perspective, reality checks, they're a necessity, So I have one last question for you here, Tim. I'd love to hear what you feel has been your greatest development in thriving through adversity, personally.
It softened my heart. Not that I had a hard heart to begin with. I hope not. I hope people wouldn't describe me that way. But having gone through the trials that I've gone through the last few years in particular, it has me caring a lot less for what the world was telling me to care about. Let's take the election as an example. Whatever side you voted on, If you did not vote for that candidate, do you realize democracy is at stake? We will not have a country anymore if you vote a certain way. And I go, whatever. It's important. I voted, but is it life or death? No. I'm going through life and death right now, matter of fact. That's life and death. And so I think what it has helped is learning to embrace. I can't say I look forward to the trauma and the tragedy ahead, but it doesn't scare me like it used to. I think, you know, psychologists, will say that we're driven by pleasure and the avoidance of pain. And I've learned to embrace the pain and knowing that the pain is actually helping me. And I learned it through open heart surgery. I made a voice recording my last night in the hospital just to record my thoughts. And the question came to me, what's more difficult, the breaking of the body or the misery of the mind? And as much excruciating pain that I was in after the open heart surgery, and the recovery was rough. I mean, being in the hospital and then the months after that, it's not a cakewalk. The misery of the mind is a bigger struggle. What was more difficult was the 8 weeks leading up to the open heart surgery and where my mind took me of what this experience would be like. And that's why I have the passion of saying, if we know who we are, if we have our why locked in, the how becomes so much easier, that we're able to overcome the very difficult circumstances in life because we know why we're here. And that's the part that excites me, is having the opportunity to be able to share that with you. And what you guys are doing with the Directors Club of America is awesome. It's awesome. We're better together. And we celebrate rugged individualism in this country. And yes, there's a lot to be said for it, but we are better together. And I feel just so appreciative to you guys that you allow me to be with you on this journey.
Well, we can't thank you enough for being here, and I can tell you this will get seen by a few thousand people within a couple weeks for sure. And the importance, there's so many things I can think back in this last hour, and I'm going to be thinking about this for the next couple weeks. But the power of the mind, but also of living in the moment. And when you think about everything from you know how you are as a father to how you are as at work, and the importance really of being present in all areas of your life, because as you're saying, live in the moment. You're not telling people don't work hard, don't invest yourself, but you also have to know what's important to you, and maybe that means if you're giving more at work, you have to really give a lot more when you get home and when you're tired, and be aware of the situations and what's going on. But um, I can't thank you enough for being honest and authentic, and just being you. And that's what I loved about you when we first talked, and even more now. And I hope to talk to you more, and you help us and be a part of this and see how we can help you too. And let us know when your new book comes out. But you're incredible, Tim, and your story is fantastic. And I just can't thank you enough for being with us.
Well, you guys are doing great work, and it's an honor to be with you. It's fantastic. This is what the industry needs, and we need it as an industry. We need it as human beings. Is that I have a passionate belief that if we're not green and growing, we're ripe and rotting. And I'm going, no, we can't do that. We got to keep growing and keep being better. So, and you're allowing us to do it. You're doing a great work. So keep it up.
Well, being better together. Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you everyone for listening. And we'll see you in July or January for our next one. And if you have not signed up yet for the free world #1 clinic with Colin Johns at the Directors Club retreat, check your email. I would sign up now because that will sell out within 24 hours. Thank you all for being here, and have a great night.